Greetings, everyone. This is Payment Lorenzo, your host, your friend, your coach. Today, I have another great guest, my good friend here, Jan Jeremias from Boston. Sunny, tropical, warm Boston, especially in this time of the year. And we connected to my favorite community, which is a serving circle, a while back. We had a beautiful conversation not long ago. A little bit about her. She's known as a mix of the Scientist Woowoo, which is absolutely beautiful. And she's been a yoga teacher for 22 years. She's a health and wellness realm and the wellness and health realm. And more specifically in the holistic field. And she just successfully became a number one international best-selling author back in December, where she shared her story. Um,
Thank
the book is titled Grief and Losses. Book was released in December of 2022. And something that really stood out about her and what she said is absolutely not just inspiring, empowering, but literally goosebump inducing. I was having goosebumps as soon as I was hearing her talk about it. 20 years ago, 22 years ago, 20 years ago, she was diagnosed with not one, but two brain tumors. And 6 months later, the first one was gone. The second one is still hanging in the background, but still not doing anything. So God, thank God. And this is what she talked about in her book. And yeah, so this is going to be a beautiful conversation. I can't wait to unpack all of that. So Jan, my who scientist friend, welcome to the show.
thank you. Thank you. So good to be here with you, Payman.
Pleasure's all mine. So tell us, for people who don't know you, we're going to talk about your business, your impact later on. But for people who don't
Mhm.
know you, who's who's Jan as a person, as a human being, and as a woman?
Oh gosh, who am I? So,
I love how
yes,
you said, "Oh gosh."
yeah, oh gosh, who am I? I'm so much. No, I'm kidding. I think that I always looked at myself as my labels, like I am a scientist, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, all those things that we kind of classify ourselves with. And then I realized that I was so much more than that. Those were just roles that I played. And that really deep down, I was just this kind, loving person and really just wanted to make a difference in the world. And so, as I think many of us do, I mean, I don't think I know that many people, or maybe I just don't hang out with them. People who don't want to have some sort of impact on the world, leave some sort of legacy. And I've often wondered what my legacy would be. Like, what should I leave the world with? And that's why when I don't have human children. I have pet children, but all of a sudden, one day I woke up and thought to myself, I'll leave people my story, like, because that I'm hoping will inspire somebody else to kind of live a better life, and let alone the people that you interact with. But that was something like tangible I could pass off to the world. So hence the story in the book, which was really about, yeah, my sort of like, I want to say publicly talking about the fact that I had two brain tumors, which I never really shared with anybody. And then also about my divorce, which a lot of people knew about and I did talk about, but was very traumatic for me. And so I kind of talk about both as a form of loss. One was this idea of loss of, when I was married, of this whole life that I thought I was going to lead or I should lead, and, all the things that we kind of plan for. And then we realize that nothing can be planned for. And then also this idea of when you get ill or when you get sick, you almost feel like you've lost control of your body. You've lost, like your body has sort of rebelled against you in some way, even if you haven't taken the best care of it. It's kind of, it's like, but we still feel like, oh my gosh, here I thought I could trust, like at least my physical health or my physical body. And we realize how fragile it is. So that's a little bit about who I am.
Wow, that's quite a lot, and we're gonna unpack all of that. Thank you for sharing all of that. First thing I want to do is I'd love to start with a series of rapid fire questions to further get to know you. Ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right. So, what makes you happy?
Um, Being outside in nature with my dog.
What makes you smile?
Um, Watching my nieces and nephews.
Now, what makes your heart sing and sets your soul on fire?
Oh, teaching yoga.
Mm. On the other end of the spectrum, what makes you sad and angry?
Um, when people, first of all, I can't, there's certain things I can't stand. And that's like, like when I see litter on the ground, like anything that sort of desecrates the earth. It's like, it was so, since I was little, it just bothers me so much. I'm like, it's not that hard. Pick up the trash.
Like you wouldn't be throwing that on the floor in your house. The earth is our house for all of us. Do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Now, what scares you?
Gosh. I think what scares me is the division, the perceived division I see in the world, where people are very, and me included, like, very divided and not willing to have a conversation or to find a common ground. That scares me.
I'm with you on that. Yes, absolutely. It's one of the reasons I left Canada. I want to be as far away from all of this nonsense. I refuse to participate in this nonsense. Like when people say, "Are you afraid about COVID?" So what's COVID? That doesn't exist in my reality. You know?
I find it so hard to handle, and I really try to go through the world in a non-judgmental way. I've not been put on this planet to judge anyone.
Exactly.
And so that bothers me a lot and it scares me.
Absolutely. What would you say is your number one personal superpower?
Um, Probably, I know that I think my personal superpower is my ability to problem solve. So when I work with a client or I talk to somebody, um, trying to get to the root cause of what's going on for them by things they tell me, yes, and some intuition, but it's like what they're sharing with me to try to help them to live their optimum life.
Yes. When was the last time you had one of those, you know, laughs that really make your cheeks hurt, your stomach is growling, and you literally have tears because you're smile laughing and you're literally rolling on the floor? When was the last time you had such a laugh?
Well, some of the people might know Mary Jane McQueen, and Mary Jane and I do a lot of collaborative work together. We run a lot of workshops together, and we always have our weekly planning sessions. And I would say we spend about 90% of those planning sessions laughing, the two of us, like silly jokes, the comments we make that almost inevitably at one point or another, like I'll just end up like laughing so hard that there are tears coming down.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. What is one thing that you used to value that you don't value anymore?
Oh gosh, I think there's a list payment.
What's the
I
number
think
one?
what's number one? Probably my idea of what educated is,
Mm.
because I come from a very academic world and an academic background. And I used to measure intelligence by degrees, like how many degrees you had.
How many letters after
And
your name? Yeah,
yeah, that's right. And then all of a sudden, like I met some people, like I have a really close friend whose husband is like owned a gas station, owned a petrol station. And I think years ago I would have been very judgmental and sat there and said, okay, just labeled him as being uneducated, because he never went to college or university. And when I have to tell you, he's probably one of the most well-read, smartest people, most intelligent people I know. And all of a sudden I had to like sit back and go, oh, like this is just so not a sign of intelligence.
absolutely. Completely agree with you. On the other side, what is one thing that you did not value before, but now you're valuing more and more?
Um, I think I value almost, I think that, that's why I love in some ways age. Not that I'm old, but I think with age comes wisdom and you realize the things that are important. And I think just, being able to move.
Mm.
easily, being generally being pain free. Each
Oh,
day when
yeah.
I get up in the morning and I get to like look outside and it's absolutely beautiful. Like, those sort of basic or simple things, which are so like sort of get me through the day. That's what I value.
As we say, back to basics and back to common sense.
That's right. Exactly.
That's it. That's where it's at.
That's it.
Uh, you love traveling, don't you?
I do like to travel.
We can do an entire podcast on traveling. We can do it another time, but I'd like to take you down a different type of traveling, down memory line. Go back to when
Okay.
you were a kid. You know, when we were kids growing up, people around us, family, relatives, neighbors, teachers always ask us, "Hey, Jan, what do you want to become when you grow up?" What was the answer to that as a little girl?
I wanted to be a veterinarian.
Why?
I don't know. I loved animals, always loved animals.
Did you grow up
Always.
with
It was
animals at home?
a few, but I mean, I wasn't afraid of anything. Like, I wasn't afraid of any dog. My mother used to like yell at me because I would go up to anything. And I just loved them. I think I always felt their animals love unconditionally. They don't judge.
Mm.
They, in general, if you're nice to them, they're nice to you, kind of thing. And so I always liked them. And so, yeah, that was what I wanted to be. A few other things along the way, but that was probably the one that always stood out for me the most.
Beautiful. Growing up, what was your relationship with school? Did you love school or did you hate school?
I didn't like school. I was not a school kid.
Why?
I don't know. I didn't like it at all. I think that there were different reasons. I didn't like being in a classroom all day. I liked being outside. Um, I was much more comfortable with animals and people that were older than me. I always had much more a better relationship with kids or adults. And so being with kids my own age, it was kind of hard for me to relate to them. And so I think I was just not a school kid.
And in school, what was your favorite subject and least favorite subject?
My favorite subject was probably math.
Mm.
Um, my least favorite subject was probably English and
Okay.
or writing, which is kind of interesting because I write a lot now. But and I don't do much math, though I still really like it. It's just,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Imagine we're in the same class, say in grade 10, 11. What kind of student and girl were you back then? Were you the shy one, the nerd type? Were you the superstar, the chatterbox? What kind of student were you back then?
When I was in what, 11?
Grade 10, grade 11, yes.
Oh, grade 11. Um, I was probably nervous. Trying to think of what else. Probably like not that I didn't especially like school, but I worked hard at it. So I was probably, the studious one. But I didn't really, wasn't something I enjoyed. I think it's from what I've learned from a lot of friends that I speak to, girls are in general, a lot of girls are very like kind of girls study and they study everything. They don't really kind of target a subject. They just work hard in everything that they do, or at least most of my friends did, whether they liked it or not.
Were you a bookworm?
I was a library kid, like I was going to be in the library studying, like kind of thing. Yeah.
And how popular were you with the boys?
Oh, not very. Not
Okay.
very. Yeah. When I was older, I dated and whatever, but not so much when I was younger.
Okay. What was your very first job? And do you remember how much you got paid the first time you worked?
Well, babysitting, probably my first, what I might call like, besides for like being a camp counselor or
Mm.
babysitting, I worked in a doctor's office helping out
You remember how
for the
much you were
summer.
making? You got paid for that first job?
I did get paid. It was probably minimum at the time, which would have been like, $3 or $4 an hour or something like that, at
That's
that
low,
time.
eh? Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
375 or something.
You remember what you did with your first paycheck at that job?
Oh, what did I do with my first paycheck?
The first time you got money that you earned yourself.
I'm trying to think. I probably went out and bought something like clothing or something. I can't really remember. Either that or I went to the movies.
Oh, yeah.
That was That's what I'm thinking about because I had a friend that we used to go to the movies all the time. So it was probably either one of those.
Yeah. Let's move forward. So, from the time you left school to now, how would you describe your path? Would you say it was pretty much straightforward, smooth sailing? Once you get into one lane, you were set for life? Was it more like turns and twists, like a roller coaster?
Oh gosh, I don't think it was a straight line at all. I mean, I guess for a certain number of years it was. I graduated and I don't know that. I mean, originally I was going to go to medical school. So, I was a science major and I was going to go to medical school and decided I was going to work before I went. And I took my boards again. I wanted to take the entry boards to get into medical school again. And then I worked in clinical research and worked around a lot of doctors and decided I didn't want to be a doctor. That was not what I wanted. Um, I
What
had
made you
said
change your mind? What made you change your mind?
well, my top skill was problem solving, and it seemed like they didn't know how to problem solve. Like they were really good at memorizing information, but they weren't good at that common sense kind of problem solving, trying to put the puzzle pieces together. And so I was like, this isn't for me, like this, I don't know, it just so didn't resonate with me. I was like, I don't want to sit there and memorize a whole bunch of material and then kind of and go through life or go through talking to people or patients and putting them all in the same category and treating them all the same because it took out the individuality to me. And I don't know if I would have expressed it like that then, but that's the way I felt, even without articulating it. And so I decided that I didn't want to go to medical school and I was going to just go into research. And I did that for a very long time. Well, for a good number of years, close to 20 years. And then life circumstances happened and I got divorced and I became ill. I got the two brain tumors and I just decided that life was too short and I was just going to go out and pursue a different path. And so, yeah, no, it wasn't at all what I thought I'd be doing, what I'm doing now.
Absolutely. Tell us about when you were diagnosed with the first. Were you diagnosed with both of them at the same time, or one after the other?
Both at the same time.
So, talk us through the moment that you get the news. What were you doing, and how did you react to that? Must have been the end of the world, right?
Oh gosh, I remember I didn't even have a clue. They had sent me for a head MRI for another reason. And I remember I was in the car and the doctor called and I was like sitting in a parking lot and just he called and I picked up the phone and he told me and I was just like remember sitting there. Um I don't know if I cried on the phone or I hung up and I cried, but I just remember thinking to myself like it was just so hard for me to digest the information that he gave me.
Sure.
I was just in such shock. I was like, what? And I think he was shocked because I don't think he didn't really have a clue as to like, that's what he was going to find out either. And then afterwards, it was just this whirlwind of trying to find, a neurologist and then a neurosurgeon and, going for some more tests and trying to make a decision as to what to do and all these different things. But that initial reaction was obviously, as everybody would imagine, scary. And all of a sudden you realize, like, oh my gosh, like, what if this is really bad and this is like the end and like life is not going to, you're going to die and I was 40, so wasn't old, to me,
Yeah.
you think you're going to live, not that you're going to live forever necessarily, but you do have some more years left. So yeah, it was really scary.
At least good thing that when the doctor called, you were not driving. Imagine that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
wow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So, when you went for those MRIs, was it because you had some headaches or something, or why?
Why? I had thyroid problems and
Okay.
had them for 20 odd years before that, which was I knew about, but for all of a sudden the medications that they were giving me weren't working and they wanted to find out why, whether there was some sort of because it's all, a lot of those hormones that are produced by the pituitary and other glands and they wanted to find out what was happening and that was one way to do it. And so one of the tumors was a pituitary cyst or tumor, and then the other one turned out was a brainstem tumor, which I think they
What's the
weren't
difference?
expecting.
What's the difference?
They were just different locations in the
Ah,
brain. One was, located in the pituitary, which is closer to here. The other one was in the back. And so I don't think they were, not that they were related in any way. It's just that they, maybe they are related, but as far as like, what they're made of in your head, but they weren't related as far as organ systems went or whatever. But it just happened to be that that's where they were located.
did you feel any pain or discomfort when you're touching them or anything in your head?
No, no, not at all. I mean, every now and then now I'll get headaches and I kind of wonder, but otherwise, because once you have it, it's not like I sit there and think about it every day, but it's not like you can wake up and they're gone. Like, they're still, it's still there, one of them. So every now and then when I start to get headaches a lot or something, which could be attributed to many different things, it doesn't
Sure.
have to be that. But I think I all of a sudden think to myself, oh my gosh, is it starting to grow or something, but in general, I know that there would be different signs that, it was having an effect. Because of the location of the brainstem one, it would affect things like my speech and my swallowing and my vision and things like that. So that's when they said if you get any of those signs, come in, if you're having trouble in any of those areas. So
So what course of action did they recommend it you?
well, originally, they never really did any course of action at all, really. I mean, they originally said they were going to monitor me for 6 months or, 3 months and then 6 months. And then, so they were going to do other MRIs, make sure, see how fast, if they were growing, how fast they were growing, and then decide what they were going to do. And so they sent me home after I went for a whole series of tests. The neurosurgeon, who I actually really liked, sent me home and said, okay, well, come back. And I remember going home and thinking to myself, well, now what do I do? Like, do I just wait? And that's when I decided to do a whole bunch of series of lifestyle changes. That was kind of like what got me started on my health journey. Not that I was unhealthy, but I was like, I just can't sit around and wait for them to tell me what to do. I'm going to go and do all the things that, well, now I know to do, but then I'm like, okay, well, the things I knew that I could do just that made common sense were like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to start to watch what I eat and be really careful about, chemicals and preservatives and anything that I considered, let's say not natural and not safe. And that's where I started. And so that's what I did is I started to change my life. I basically greened my home. So I got rid of like, all the toxic cleaners and all the toxic, all the personal care products that I thought were like had 1,000 chemicals in them and things like that. And then I did that for like pretty, I wasn't wasteful. So it's not like I came home and I totally threw away everything that was in my home. It was just I'm very logical. So I sat there and said, okay, well, when one thing is done, I will replace it with something better. So if I finish one thing, I'm going to go out and buy, a cleaner or shampoo that's going to be better, like that's healthier, has less chemicals. And I started replacing things and then changing my diet a lot and started taking supplements and then went back like for the first set of MRIs and the second, and the pituitary one was gone. That one had gone away. They couldn't find it. And the doctor kind of looked at me and said, I don't know what you did and I don't know why, but it's not there anymore. And the second one, they didn't know what to do. And
Ah,
so the doctor was like, well, you can do surgery because technically it should not be there. And you can do surgery. And I didn't know what to do. And I remember, I think it was my brother. And, I always thank him for this because he said to me, go into the doctor's office and say to him, if I was your daughter or your mother, would you do this surgery? And
yeah.
so I went into
Okay.
the doctor and I said, that question. And he said, no. And I said, okay, I guess that's my answer.
Did you ask
And
why?
I think, yeah, because it's in a location that let's say it's like, it's like a golf ball or a meatball, and the nerves have grown all around it for whatever reason. And those nerves are related to things, like I said, like
Oh,
swallowing
wait,
and
is that
vision,
the one at the front or the back?
the back.
Okay, so the front one is
So,
appearing. Okay.
yep. And so the one at the back. And he said, well, the nerves have grown all around it. And he said that for whatever reason, your body has adjusted to it being there. We don't have any idea how long it's been there, and your body has adapted and you function fine. And he said, if we take it out, it's almost like the nerves go into shock because all of a sudden there's this space and they don't know what to do. So he said, temporarily, or at least they hope it's temporarily, things like, they'll have to teach you how to swallow again, and your vision might be affected. And he said, as long as you're asymptomatic and you're not having any symptoms, I would just, I wouldn't mess with something that seems to be fine. And he said, it could never grow and be like that for the next whatever, how many years, or at some point it could start to grow again.
And
And
what kind of symptoms, sorry, what kind of symptom did they warn you about?
things like having difficulty swallowing and
Ah,
eating food, and my vision would change. So all of a sudden I would be able to see as well, or I would start to lose my vision. Um, I think my hearing would be affected. So there's certain things that, for a while I definitely did monitor. Like I've always been pretty good with my eyes, but I would go for hearing tests and things like that just to see if there was any deterioration. But besides for, I think, probably age-related hearing, vision changes and hearing changes, there's really never been anything. And so I've kind of just gone with life, trying to live still as healthy as I can. And that's
yeah. What was the single biggest lifestyle change that you made that had the biggest positive impact in how your body reacted to it?
biggest.
Or the one change that you made that had the biggest impact?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what I would say. The biggest thing was probably my yoga practice.
Mm,
I think yoga taught me how to listen to my body and how to listen to myself. So that was the most valuable to me. It was an opportunity where I actually started to literally play with what I could do and to try to listen on a given day. Because if you like every day, we know we wake up and we're not necessarily the same. I just don't know that we acknowledge it. It's kind of like we feel like the very, the at least in the West, it's the very much, and maybe globally, it's this very much like, okay, well, I don't really feel great, but I'm going to do it anyway kind of attitude. And I'm going to like suck it up and
out, yeah.
struggle through. Right. Exactly. And it was kind of like learning that if I didn't listen, I ended up hurting myself or in yoga, or I ended up like the next day felt even worse. And not that like, I don't think I'm ever going to be perfect at it because I think your ego gets in the way and all of a sudden you're like, but it started to train me to be able to do that, to be able to listen to myself and acknowledge the fact that, okay, today I'm tired, or today, for whatever reason, my back's bothering me, or whatever it is, and not to ignore that kind of stuff.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that because I've had so many people that have kicked cancer, even terminal cancers, all told me the same thing is that it was a reset for them. It was a wake up call because, sometimes we get a headache with a pain somewhere. We don't pay attention to it because we have much important thing to do, which is paying the bills or whatever, until the body says, enough. You need to listen to me now. And it gets you this big diagnose. And that's when you really, oops, now we need to pay attention. And then that's when we take a look at things at the highest level, at the deeper level, and then we make the necessary changes, lifestyle, nutrition, stress, and all that. And that's when we are literally recreating ourselves a version 2.0. I've seen that from countless people, even some people telling me that them getting cancer, I'm talking terminal cancer, was the biggest blessing in disguise, the greatest gift of their lives. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. And it always makes me, in some ways, not sad for myself, but I think when I look at people and watch them, like, navigate the world or live the way they're living, and they sort of unconscious, like they don't think about all those things. I'm always like want to shake them and say, like, do it now before you get that diagnosis. But the problem is that we don't. And I do think it has been a blessing. I mean, I think it brought me so many good things, so many good things.
Like
And
what?
thankfully, oh, like I said, that body awareness. I think a whole community of people, and I'm not talking about other people with cancer or with
Mm.
tumors. I'm talking about people who are very aware of the same things and are really committed to living the same way. And so very aware and awake, basically. And that was really a blessing. Um, it's it's an interesting, and I think like also the value of like everything I have. Like we were talking about what do I value? Is I think that when you are afraid of losing stuff, all of a sudden you begin to appreciate, like you said, the small stuff, and the simple stuff. It's like you realize that, oh my gosh, I get to wake up today and look outside and it's absolutely spectacular, or it's snowing outside and that's beautiful, but you really get to appreciate the things that you have. So I think that when you have everything to lose, then everything becomes valuable.
It makes you grateful for the slightest thing. Like one of the most beautiful quotes I saw is that each morning we start the day by opening two beautiful gifts. Do you know what those are? Our eyes. When you
Yeah,
open your eyes. Each day is a present. That's why I call it present. Present has two meanings. Present right now and a gift, literally and figuratively speaking.
I love that. I love words. So I think that that's really, that's nice. That's such a nice dual meaning,
Yes.
to be present and a present,
And a gift, yeah.
Yeah, and a gift. Really true.
So for you, how would have your life been different had you not been diagnosed with cancer 20 years ago?
Oh gosh. I think I would have I don't know. I think of it being, my gift, my wish is for people. It's not even like, yes, I want them to live healthier lives, but I want them to start to listen to themselves. This whole idea of like what feels right, not be able to problem solve for themselves. Like, oh, okay, well, does this make sense to me? Like the doctor is telling me this, or the health professional, or the society is telling me this. Does this feel right to me? And I think I probably would have been like everybody else, kind of like going through life, kind of in this very unconscious way. And yeah, without awareness, like without being able to think for themselves, think for myself. And even though I don't really know if that's true, because I always had the ability to kind of like, I was never a conformist. But that's the way I think of it, is kind of going down the road like everybody else does, with certain particular values and like values of things that were much more, which I now consider unimportant. Like the materialistic things don't really,
Yeah,
don't really, resonate, don't really excite me.
I'm with you because ultimately the greatest gift we have, number one, is our health, number two, our time. And once you take any of those away, nothing else matter. They can offer you all the gold, all the money in the world, but if you don't have any time left, and if you don't have your health, they're gonna be useless.
That's right.
So what message, what tip, what advice would you have to someone that either is currently been recently diagnosed with cancer or someone that doesn't have cancer yet, but to prevent from having cancer? What advice would you give? I guess it would be two different advice. We got two different stages, but what advice, first of all, would you give to someone who's currently been recently diagnosed with cancer?
Okay, so one practical thing I would say, and I did this, and that is find someone that you can navigate the more traditional health world with, like an advocate. And I don't mean an advocate that's going to make your decisions necessarily, but someone who's going to go with you to the appointments
Mhm.
and listen to everything with you. Because having been there, you are like, I was in shock. And I remember I would go and listen, but to like what they said, but I wasn't hearing everything. And I needed somebody else there to kind of grasp and to hear what I wasn't able during that time to hear. So that when I got home and we could talk about it. So I went with friends. I think my dad went with me for a few visits to doctors. My brother came once. So I would say find somebody you can navigate that stuff with because it's scary and we're overwhelmed and we're getting a lot of information. And now I had a science background, so a lot of it I understood. But for someone who doesn't have that kind of background, it's a different language. And
Indeed.
all of a sudden, it's kind of like you need to go in with an interpreter, so to speak. So that would be one of the most practical things I could say. And don't expect yourself to do it because I think we are. It's like be compassionate to yourself because I don't know if I was at the time, but that would be like just remind yourself that this is scary and overwhelming and you can do it, but bring in like it's there's no weakness in asking for help. So if you need to ask somebody to go with you, and even err on the side of bringing them with you. And then, um, so that would probably be my biggest advice for somebody who is diagnosed is a very practical thing.
That's a great advice. And also, another thing is also, what is the importance of one thing is that a lot of people, especially at that stage, when they get a very life-altering diagnosis or something, they tend to shut down and not reach out for other people as opposed to, I don't want to be judged. I don't want them to look at me differently with pity or anything. I think that's one of the worst things you can do, especially at that time. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's hard because like I said to you, I never really talked about it with anybody. I mean, I have like probably 8 friends that, maybe less that knew about my diagnosis outside of, let's say, my immediate family.
Mhm.
And never talked about it. And that was because I didn't want to be labeled as the person with the brain tumors.
Sure.
And I don't know, I don't think it's necessarily anything physical. Like I have a really close friend who lost his sister who does a lot of grief work. He's a somatic grief therapist, grief coach now. And he said he didn't want to be known as the guy who lost his sister, And so I think that we are very fearful of being categorized or labeled. And so that kind of causes us to kind of keep it all close to the vest. But my one thing I've learned is one is bottling it up inside is not helpful.
Mhm.
You've
Yeah.
got to talk about it with someone. You've got to get it, whether that be a therapist or a support group or a friend, or I always think it's nice to talk to people, even if you're not going through a support group, but find someone or people that are going through it too, because you can relate to it and they kind of get you on a level that maybe someone who's not going through that health challenge does not, as sympathetic and empathetic as people are. Um, so I think that there's nothing wrong with you don't want to escape it and ignore it and not appreciate like or feel those emotions, but you also don't want to seclude yourself so much that you have no contact with anybody. And find things you enjoy. Like, find things you like to do and do those, like things that like silly things I did at the time. I remember I told you I loved animals, and I remember there was a place that was near my house that was like a where they sold dogs and sold puppies, and they used to have the puppies in pens, and you could come in and you could play with the puppies, like people were going to buy them, and I would go into the store and play with the puppies. Like it was just like a time for me to like find pure joy and pure like and for like maybe it was for seconds or not even milliseconds where I could forget about what
Mhm.
was happening and give me a little space around it because it was scary.
Sure.
Yeah. And then for what was that? I think you asked me,
If
what would I
someone,
have?
so that was the first part of the question for someone who's currently going through it, but what advice would you have for other people who are not currently, they don't have cancer, but what advice would you give them to prevent having cancer?
Okay, I think that, when I said I loved yoga because it taught me like body awareness, I started to ask. So now when I get up each day and when I'm working with clients, I like to sort of encourage them when they get up in the morning to literally pause and say to themselves, like, how do I feel today?
Mhm.
Like, what's like literally, how do I feel physically? Take a moment. How do I feel emotionally? How do I feel, just cognitively, like my mind? What am I thinking? And to take, pause and just reflect on that for a moment and then make a choice, like one thing, one small thing they could do that day that's going to make a difference.
Mhm.
One small thing. I think that and start to train themselves to try to start to listen to themselves. That would probably be my one suggestion because I think it all begins with us. Like we make the decisions. So I can say you should start to eat better, but that's so vague for people. They're like, okay, well, what does that mean exactly? Like right now, most people think they eat okay. So I think that's kind of, but if you start to ask people how they feel, then maybe they start to think about it a little bit more. And then they're like, okay, well, and then to me, the next step is like they sit there and they wake up and they don't feel well. And maybe the next thing is like, okay, well, what did I eat yesterday? Or what did I do yesterday that kind of had these like, where I don't feel well today.
Yeah,
So yeah, so that would be probably the one thing I would tell people.
beautiful. Love. Like for example, changing the diet is huge because what you put in our body just has a lot of implication. Like for example, myself, I've been starting intermittent fasting. At 6 o'clock here, 6 p.m. I haven't had any food all day. I just had a carrot juice and around noon, and now I'm having a coffee, and I'm not hungry at all. So I eat just one meal a day. These are all as a way to preventive, but also I want to lose some weight. That's just but yeah, things like this, intermittent fasting. See what really, and also I've been cutting sugar, alcohol, even though I didn't drink last night, but that's a different story. But other than that, cutting off carbs, anything that's sugar. I've been hearing a lot of amazing things about the keto and carnivore diet. Countless people, especially on YouTube, even not just the videos, but go to and read the comments of people who have had incredible life-changing benefits as a result of changing to this kind of diet. See which one speaks to you, makes the most sense to you, and get on it. Do something.
Yeah, I think, I love all that. And I do think it's really, and I also am really careful. I'm pretty much vegan now, so um, except for the fact that I eat eggs, but otherwise I'm a vegan.
Mm,
And it's really interesting. Like I've changed my diet through the years quite a lot. Some was out of almost like necessity where certain foods just didn't agree with me anymore. Other things were, just, it turns out that I couldn't eat. But it's to learn that I love all the information out there, but just remember one size does not fit all.
yes.
It does not like one like I know a lot of people who intermittent fast, and I pretty much like I don't eat one meal a day, but I eat two meals a day. Um, but that's not great for everyone. You know what I mean? And it's that's my big fear is
Yeah.
that there begins to be a trend and then everyone adopts it, and then it's kind of like, well, it's like me. Here for a long time, it was everybody talked about like you want to lose weight or you want to get fit, run, become a runner and jog or whatever, or run. And I ran for a long time. Now, with my body and everything, I probably should not have been a long distance runner. So I probably should not have been a marathoner. But it was kind of like this attitude, well, everybody should run and running was great. And people, and so I think that you just have to learn that,
Hmm.
to kind of stop around a little bit and to
Yeah.
try something and give it a chance. Like I'm not saying try it one day, try it for like 3 months and see how it works for you. And then
Even for a month at a time, a week at a
like,
time.
yeah, but and just see, like I always tell people it takes about 90 days for our cells in our body to go through a cycle. And so like if I change something, I give it a period of time and then I'm like, okay, How is this? Do I feel different? What do I notice? And then maybe make another change. And try not to make too many changes at once.
Absolutely.
Because I don't think you know what's working and what's not working.
Exactly. One last question about that topic, and that is, I'm pretty sure very important. What is the importance for someone that's going through cancer to have a professional, especially help them on the mental aspect of it, like a psychologist, a therapist, things you mentioned having someone to go with you to appointment because your brain shuts down. There's a lot of information in different language being thrown at you just to absorb all of that and digest. But what is the importance also on top of that to have someone to walk to guide you through and help you as far as the mental aspect, the coping, the psychology, and all that?
Um, yeah, I think it's really important. I'm always a huge advocate. I think that the mind we know is really powerful. And I have a really close friend, and her son is a survivor of cancer, young. And I always remember the fact that and got diagnosed when he was very small. And I remember her saying that at one point, years after, like, I mean, some years after, he turned to them one day. He was only like 10 years old or 11 years old. And he said to them, like, he had no clue that people died of cancer. Like, they never talked about it, they never brought it up. It was kind of like it was not an option. And so that always struck me because I think that, he didn't know that that was like, there was like, that wasn't an option for like, he never really thought about it. And I think that sometimes, like, it just shows the power of the mind to me because it wasn't like something that he thought about. Like, it didn't enter into the picture at all. And I don't think we need to live in denial of like denying ourselves those thoughts of like, but I think that as positive as we can stay and whatever mechanism, if therapy helps, be all, if like a mindset coach helps to navigate that, to keep you in a much more positive frame of not mind and in those positive emotions, do that. I mean, there are many different ways and a lot of different therapies, which I've heard, um, you know, pet therapy and people who do like, you know, who work, in the arts where you get some sort of creative outlet and you get to stay in
Yes,
that positive and stay in that positive mindset, I think is really important.
absolutely.
Um, and then emotionally, I think that you have to, I was in something and somebody said, remember that crying is a form of self-care. And I loved that. And I think that it's okay to let yourself just feel because I think burying all that stuff is not useful at all.
It's okay to be vulnerable.
That's right. It is.
Yeah, wow. Beautiful. Love that. Those are amazing tips. Thank you for sharing. Do you have any other tips that you can think of that you can give to some other people currently going through that?
Um, no, I would say that just the final tip is obviously if anybody, ever wants to reach me, feel free, but really, don't do it alone would be
Yes.
probably don't
Don't
do
shut
it alone.
down. Don't shut down on your own. Yes.
Yeah, don't do it alone. There's,
Still
yeah, just
coming. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. You mentioned reaching out to you. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna call it here for today. And we're going to do a part two in a week from now to talk about your business. We haven't even talked about that. So if
Okay.
someone wants to connect with you, Jan, what's the best way to do so?
The best way is obvious, is probably through Facebook and LinkedIn. That's probably the best. I'm really good at responding to messages.
Mhm.
I can happy to give people my phone number. That's great. Email is probably the least way to get like just I get too many emails and I feel like they get lost. And so I'm always to people like if you don't hear from me, then message me because that means I probably missed it along the way. People can check out my website, but I just find it easier for people to connect with me, through Facebook or LinkedIn.
What's your Facebook? What's your LinkedIn?
My Facebook is under my name, Jan Jeremias, and so is my LinkedIn. And so they can connect with me there, send me a message, tell me maybe they heard the podcast or they heard, they know you or know somebody else in the community. And I'd be more than glad to set up a conversation with them
Absolutely.
anytime.
And once again, the title of your book that was just recently released.
Oh, Faces of Grief, 30 stories of loss and, loss and resilience. So it's 30 stories of putting the pieces back together again.
What did you talk in your chapter about?
Oh, I talked about divorce and my diagnosis.
Okay. We can unpack that in the part two. So listen, Jan, you're an absolute, I love talking to you. You're a treasure. You are a gift. You've been blessed with phenomenal gifts. I salute you. You're truly with a heart. Keep shining your light. Keep blessing the world with your presence, your impact, and your gifts. Stay safe, stay awesome, and talk to you next week for part two, my friend. Take care.
Take care. Bye. Thanks, everybody.
You're welcome.